Good evening. We're calling to order the regularly scheduled meeting of El Segundo City Council, Tuesday, June 20. Catholic Church will give our invocation, and Mayor Pro Tem Boyles will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, you guide and govern everything with order and love. All who participate, council members, members of our city staff, and the members of the public as well who will provide input, fill all of them with the spirit of your wisdom, that in the words of your prophet Isaiah, we may come and reason together your will, and may their decisions be for the greater good and well-being of all who live or work in our city. Enable all of us to use wisely the gift of El Segundo, which you have so graciously entrusted to us, that we all might be saints you promise. May we never forget the numbers of our own residents who are less fortunate than are we. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Father Smith and Mayor Pro Tem. Okay. This evening, we're going to start off with an introduction.
Mayor, members of council, members of the public, tonight I want to introduce Randall Collins. And Randall, could you please step up to the microphone? Randall Collins is our full-time emergency services coordinator and has served in over 50 actual emergencies, which is probably more than all of us in the room combined. He brings a great deal of experience and education, 15 years of experience in emergency management. Just recently graduated 2 weeks ago from USC, both a police officer and prior to that as a member of the U.S. Marine Corps. So we're very happy to have Randall. His responsibility is to get the city, not just the city employees, but the city, residents and businesses prepared for the next potential. Like Randall to introduce himself and say hello.
Well, thank you, sir, and Madam Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's just a great day to prepare for disaster, as they all are. And it's not if, it's by the city to come here and do a good job. My intent is to make sure that the city is prepared, resilient, so when a disaster happens, we'll be able to keep functioning and save lives, property. That's what I'm excited about doing. That's my passion of mine, and has been for 17 years now. And I'm excited to work with all the departments, especially with the emergency services, police and fire departments, and at the ready for when the disaster happens.
Well, thank you. Yes, welcome. We're delighted to have you here. It's been a process over several years to have the emergency manager coordinator position approved, and then to go. The first responsibility of a city is for public safety, and our employees do a great job at that. Our police and our fire, and you're the third part of that triangle, like our city manager said, not just to prepare the employee if it's a matter of when we have something, be it an earthquake or something else. So we're thrilled you're here, and I would love for all of us to take a photo with you, have Robert take a picture to welcome you.
All right, everybody, a couple of photos here. All right.
Now we have a proclamation. Whereas parks and recreation make lives and communities better. Wide public opinion research, 98% of California households visit a local park at least once a year. 2 in 3 households visit a park once a month, and 50% of households participate in an organized recreation program, and most park use is with recreation, as it provides positive alternatives for children and youth to reduce crime and mischief, especially during non-school hours. It promotes the arts, it increases social connections, aids in therapy, and promotes lifelong learning. And whereas residents and adults to play and be active, exercise and group sports, and whereas parks provide access to the serenity and the inspiration of nature and outdoor spaces, as well as preserve and protect the historic, natural, and cultural resources, including children, youth, families, adults, seniors, businesses, community organizations, and visitors, benefit from the wide range of parks, trails, sports fields, tennis courts, facilities, and programs, including the open space of recreation provided by the City of El Segundo Recreation and Parks Department. And whereas the City of El Segundo urges all its residents to recognize that parks and recreation enriches the lives of its residents and visitors, as well as adding value to the community and neighborhoods as Parks and Recreation Month. Now therefore, on this 20th day of June, 2017, the mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, hereby proclaim the month of July 2017 as Parks Make Life, to use and enjoy its parks, trails, open space, facilities, and recreation opportunities. And accepting this evening is our Director of Parks and Recreation, Meredith Pettit. If you have any of your employees in here, they are welcome to join us.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for the proclamation. Not that it's a competition, but I think Public Works only. No, I would just take the opportunity to thank the City Council for your continued support of the Parks and Recreation Department, but also to invite and remind the community that there are so many things to do, not only in the month of July, but all summer long. Our recreation park, company picnics and summer barbecues, and it's just really a fun place to be, and we really enjoy doing what we do for the community. Don't forget to come out to our concerts in the park. We have the next decades in line are the 60s, and of course our 4th of July fireworks show and community event with a special extra finale of fireworks that'll be really a sight to see on the 4th of July, thanks to the Centennial celebration. So thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Brand,
Present.
Councilmember Dugan,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles,
Here.
Mayor Fuentes.
Here. It's only 5 minutes per person, 30 minutes total. Seeing no public communication, we will close. Procedural motions, consideration of a motion to read all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda by title only.
So moved.
Opposed, 4-0. Thank you. Let's see. Before we go to item 1, we're going to take an item out of order. The first item will be item number 13, consideration and possible action for the City Council to receive and file the comprehensive annual 30th, 2016 fiscal impact zero. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, Joe Lillio will introduce this item. We have Mark Davis here from our audit firm.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. Through September 30th, 2016, Mark Davis, who's partner with our audit firm, he will be presenting.
Good evening. Results of this year's audit are a little bit about the scope of the audit, what the responsibilities were this year, timing of the audit, some qualitative aspects of those items that are included in the financial statements this year, some corrected and uncorrected misstatements. These are the auditors. The scope this year included just the financial statement audit of the city. It did not include a single audit like you have had done in years past. The law had changed related to the single audit back at the end of 2015 and required to have a single audit. This past year, you fell below that threshold, hence no single audit was required. We as auditors are required to communicate with you as the council at least twice a year. And we have done that in November of last year when we first began the audit. We talked about what the scope was going to be, and today represents our final communication. The city is responsible for the financial statements, the preparation of the financial statements, and responsible for expressing an opinion on those financial statements as to whether or not they're free of material misstatement and prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And to do that, we design our audit to be able to express that reasonable but not absolute assurance, that absolute assurance that would require us looking at every single transaction that you have. And we just can't, that would be much too cost prohibitive to do. So we design our audit to look at sampling and assess risk and focus the audit more from a risk perspective. One for fraud, if we find something that is fraudulent in nature, we will bring it up to you. As I mentioned, the timing of this year's audit, we performed our interim procedures back in November and December of 2016, and our risk assessment that I had touched on. The final portion of our audit began in late January and continued all the way through the end of March. Here's where we get into the guts of the substantive testing of all of the account balances and looking at analyticals, your year-over-year change. Need to focus additional effort. Most important thing there is you received an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, so congratulations on that. From a qualitative aspects, the items included in the financial statements. The financial statements do include policies that's listed out in Note 1. There was a new accounting standard that was implemented this past year, and it's referred to as GASB 72. And this has to do with fair value disclosures related to various asset and liabilities. Your fair value disclosures, the additional disclosures this year, let the reader know from what sources all those fair values were determined. Were they determined based upon readily available information? Was they determined based upon similar type of information for a similar type of asset? In preparing the financial statements, management does use estimates and judgments for certain of the numbers, and we've listed here a handful of those more significant estimates that are included this year. Useful lives, depreciation methodology, types of infrastructure and valuation for donated assets and assigning dollar values to those. If there are workers' compensation and general liability claims, what's the value of those claims that have been incurred but not yet reported to you? The contribution for your other post-employment benefits, and an estimate of what your unbilled water receivables are. This year we did have a number of audit adjustments that were detected as a result of the audit, several related, having to do with the LAWA fund and the RSI fund, and this is all having to do with the close down of the program, the resolution of your discussions with the FAA over the last few years, as well as just a cleanup of all the accounting as a result of to be made as a result of those issues to both LAWA and the RSI fund. Dollar amounts are significant. But again, it's just a reflection of taking what was decided with the wind down of this fund and putting it in the RSI fund. The bottom adjustment there on that slide is the first adjustment that's not related to water or RSI. I'm sorry, not related to LAWA or RSI fund. We did have an adjustment to the water liability. This is just taking the actuarial valuation that we're given from the state's actuaries and being able to record that on the books in the water fund. In the sewer fund, same thing, the very first adjustment, about $87,000 properly recorded into the sewer fund this year. We had an adjustment of about $80,000, reducing the capital assets for removing capital assets for pipelines that were replaced during the year. We had an adjustment for $98,000 to the beginning fund balance for revenue that should have been recorded in the prior year. In the equipment replacement fund, there was an adjustment for the purchase of a fire truck. That cash went out before the end of the year, but the asset didn't come in and was not placed in service until after the end of the fiscal year. In the capital projects fund, there was an adjustment for about $237,000 to recognize funds that was not previously met criteria to be recognized as revenue, so we recognize that now as revenue. And then finally, there was one adjustment that's we classify as an uncorrected misstatement. This is what's referred to as a audited state beginning fund balance in the general fund for grant payments related to Chevron grants that should have been recorded as unearned revenue last year. They were recorded as revenue last year. Between the 2 years, balances were all fairly stated, so there was no adjustment. The city elected not to go back and restate those prior year numbers because everything was flushed out for this year. Those were all of the audit adjustments we had for this year. From a management letter, 2 comments that we classify as significant deficiencies and 6 comments that we classify as best practices. This is down significantly from last year when we talked. Last year we had 5 significant deficiencies. Practice. The prior year audit was completed right at the end of last fiscal year. I was here in November of just 2016 talking to you about the results of that audit. Staff has made lots of significant strides during that interim and up through the course of this audit to be. Of the 8 comments there, 7 of these are repeats from last year, just not enough time to be able to address the issues. The first 2 significant deficiencies are both repeat comments from last year. We already talked about all of the audit adjustments that were completion of bank reconciliations. When we came out to do the audit, the bank reconciliations were just not completed until after we had started doing the audit. They were several months behind. From a best practice standpoint, we've talked about for about the last 6 years, and it has to do with really having a technology master plan put into place, reviewing user access. We did have a situation this year where there were 3 users that were access. It took about 2 to 3 weeks for their access to get removed from the system. And then one new item related to information systems controls this year having to do with data backups, and putting together those backups are going to be retained and actually be able to test those backups. In the event that you do have a disaster and you need to restore data, it's good to be able to test those backups periodically to make sure you actually can restore your data. Continued analysis of deposits payable. This item has also been reported for the last 5 years. The city has about $900,000 of deposits payable on its books, and there's been lots of great strides in being able to identify all of those deposits with who you owe, a handful of accounts left that make up or within that $900,000 to be able to identify who is owed funds to. So good strides making way there. The third item is review of open contracts. The city has a good list open. A lot of those contracts don't have expiration dates on them. And we had recommended that the city go back and review those contracts, review whether or not they should be put out to competitive bid, or if not, then just document the reasons open. This item has been on for the last 5 years. The next item has to do with the accounting for unredeemed golf course gift certificates and lessons. At September of 2016, you had were outstanding and about $84,000 in lessons that were outstanding. We'd like to see the accounting for that cleaned up, and that there was really no record of who you had to give the lessons to. And I think the city's making efforts to clean that. Next item has to do with very minor general ledger account balances. As we go through and we look at the balances in the city's accounts, some of the balances aren't normal balances, meaning that we have a balance. All very immaterial dollar amounts, but they're there, and the city should make some effort to investigate those and clean those up. That's been reported for the last couple years. Last one is the only new item for this year, and this is controls over credit card transaction program. We each year we pick out a handful of items to test that are unpredictable in nature, things that the city is not going to know that we're going to do. Much of the audit, they know what we're going to be looking at year in and year out, but we like to keep them on. This was one of those items this year. So in looking at the CalCard transactions, we did have a number of exceptions this year where A couple of the transactions we looked at were coded incorrectly. We had one transaction that wasn't sufficiently supported, and then 5 transaction. And there's some mechanisms in place that to prohibit that dollar or the single day dollar limit from being exceeded, but there's no documentation in the file authorizing that those limits were exceeded. Just some other matters that are in the financial statements. There is required supplementary information in the financial statements. This consists of management's discussion and analysis right at the beginning of the statement, as well as budgetary and pension disclosures. All of that's required to be included in the financial statements. There's also other information. Other information represents all of the other individual fund balances, individual fund financial statements. Those are under auditing standards, meaning that however management compiled those numbers, we look to make sure that they're using the same methods that they're compiling those numbers as they are the numbers in the front of the financial statements that we're expressing our opinion on. There's also 2 other second financials. And then lastly, just our other final communications to you. We did have no disagreements with management in performing the audit this past year. At the end of the audit, we do ask management to provide us all of our inquiries and provided all the documentation that we asked for during the course of the audit, and they did do that. To our knowledge, management has not consulted with any other accountants as far as application of accounting principles. The course of this whole year, we did remain available to the city as a resource. Should questions come up, we much prefer having staff do contact us when they have an unusual transaction during the year so that we can provide them some guidance in recording those. With that,
does your firm act as a resource to the investment committee that the city has, or works with the treasurer's office?
we have not.
Have not. Okay, it's another firm.
I have some questions. First of all, I think these are more targeted towards Joe. Great job bringing the number of audit discrepancies down year over year. I remember it was a very exhaustive list last year. A couple concerns. I know we got a new technology committee, so I'd just love to hear what we're doing there. The thought of somebody having access to Eden or one of our financial systems is a little alarming. I'd like to understand how many open contracts we're talking about, the ones that we haven't gone back out to bid for, just kind of get a sense. And then the biggest one for me that was a repeat of last year's the banking reconciliations. I assume that's improved in terms of the timing to close out the books, but I was hoping you could talk to that a little bit. And then finally, the Cal card. I don't understand. Is that like an internal credit card system that? Okay. 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 Okay, got it. So I don't know if you want to do that now or later, Joe, but those questions. Thank you.
As far as the IS comments, maybe we can bring it up to who comes on board, work with that individual to come up with solutions along with the technology committee. Number of open contracts, I don't have that information, but I can definitely email it out to the council. So when that was not until October of 2016, which was already the start of the current year. So it was just the whole timing of, I think, when I came on board, getting the 14-15 audit closed, the timing of that. A lot of these, the bank reconciliations, those are current. So as of the end of May, we were current on that. The controls over credit cards, there are approximately 40 P cards issued throughout the city to department heads, managers, some field staff. They have a daily limit that's tied to that, so it's automatically daily limit, depending on higher level than field staff or managers. In order to increase that daily level, for instance, there was an emergency purchase that had to be made to fix some type of water break or sewer break, as an example. That department would have to, that would be reviewed by myself, approved. The purchasing agent who also oversees the CalCard program needs to call our bank to increase that daily limit. It's just a one-time daily limit increase, it's not permanent. And then the individual can make behind all that approval and process wasn't attached to the CalCard transaction. So we've made changes to that, and it will be attached moving forward. So that item was resolved. And just to make a quick comment, so for this year, the 15-16 audit, 8 findings, so that's a reduction of 53% in the findings. Of the 6 best practice findings, 4 have already been resolved to date, and we're working on as the open contracts, and the second one is the IS comment.
Of particular relief to me is, if you recall, we had a great deal of RSI work occurred in 2014. The way the federal grant works is the city 15-16 that we're discussing. We were still in pretty lengthy discussions with the FAA about what was going to be reimbursed and to what amount. And I'm glad to announce or report tonight that we've been fully reimbursed through March, which is about as current as I think we've been since the program's been in operation. So it's a major relief that we were able to resolve those issues, particularly related to the furnaces, if you recall.
Findings, you partially answered it, I think, when you said that staff gives representations, but is there a corrective action plan that's due, and is there any kind of due date for those, or?
Not back to us. What we do ask is when we have that we in the management letter, management responses included. What we do then is the following year, when we come out to do the audit, we will look at what management's efforts are to correct all of the prior year comments and make sure that, yes, in fact, what they said they were going to do, they did do. That's all built into part of the audit process. But from a corrective action plan or a track of a corrective action plan, we don't do that. Only just when we come out to look at the audit, we look at just where they were at on the problem.
Yeah, Mayor, if I could just add to your inquiry. So for the 14-15 audit, the findings that were presented by Mark last year, I don't know if you recall or not, but I presented a update report card on those audit findings in December at the county during strategic planning, or at some subsequent council meeting, provide a report card on where we're at.
Thank you. Mike, any questions, comments?
No, I was just keying in on the closing out an audit. Since they don't issue you a formal request for a letter and you don't issue one, I guess, how do we find out about it? We hear about it 6 months later at a report. It would be nice to see some kind of timely errors and omissions, acceptance as we go forward. It would be nice to see that earlier, and then, as opposed to after it's already been resolved. So to know that it exists and that people are working on it, that's what I'm looking for. It's just, I don't have a problem with them other than knowing about them and knowing that people are working to resolve them. Through Mona would be my guess right now. I'm just kidding.
City Manager.
So Councilmember Dugan, we do have a management representation letter where some of that's addressed, but maybe we can formalize that to council from Finance Department, City Manager to
just what was found and what we're doing to resolve it. It's nice to know that that work's ongoing, and when you see it and people are working on it. So,
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to our possible action regarding environmental assessment number EA 1177, zone text amendment number ZTA 16-06 regarding accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in residential zones. Adopting this ordinance as statutory further environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, California Public Resources Code 21,000 et al. CEQA, and CEQA guidelines, because it involves the adoption of an ordinance regarding accessory dwelling units in a single-family government code section 65852.2 as set forth in the section 21080.17 of the Public Resources Code pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15282H. City of
This item is coming back to you to reflect the changes that the majority of you wished made to this ordinance. Sam Lee is here to provide an update and answer questions.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members. Last council meeting, the council held a public hearing, heard many of the testimony from the public, and directed staff to modify the proposed ordinance with 2 changes. First being to allow the detached ADU accessories The second change was to increase the maximum size of the detached accessory dwelling units to 1,200 square feet. Those changes have been made, and so this item is ready for the introduction, and like the council to schedule July 5th.
Any comments?
I don't think we increased the maximum size. I think we took out the minimum size requirements of it, correct?
An 800 square foot limitation on detached accessory dwelling units. The council director has to increase that to 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
That was what the maximum allowed by the state, if I remember correctly. 1,200?
The maximum size number or attached to single family homes, but council directed to use that number also for detached buildings.
So I have some things I would like to say. As you know, when we last met, it's been changed. There's nothing we can do to not allow ADUs on R1. So we don't have any recourse, but I believe we need to find a way to make it work for El Segundo. In 2005, the city had an issue. I spoke about this at our last meeting a little. In the meantime, I've done some research and I've spoken to the former some of the former council members who were on council at that time, because this became a very emotional issue in town. Last meeting wants to have dwelling units on their home so they can take care of family members, or maybe someday family members will take care of them. I certainly understand that. But this became an issue 12 years ago when units started going up in town and the property. The light would be different in their backyards or on their houses. The wind, the breezes could be different. The noise, it became an issue. It became such an issue that it actually ended up showing up in large numbers at council meetings, and I pulled I pulled one of the minutes from a meeting in 2005 where probably 15, 20 people showed up to talk. It's being built, and it became such an issue that the city had to spend over $750,000 to clean it up. Again, these units weren't said you had to allow it like we do now. I understand that, but it had a big impact on the neighborhoods, and again, it cost the city $750,000 to clean it up, and it actually caused a lot of turmoil in the city within some departments and with. I don't support increasing the square footage. I support now. I know I said last time I also would support having a detached unit, but I want to go back and say that I support what the plan attached and that the square footage would not exceed 800 square feet.
Introduction.
Yes, sir.
An ordinance amending Title 8 and 15 of the El Segundo Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units is ready for introduction.
I would introduce the ordinance and ask that it be brought back on the 5th of July.
It'll be noticed for that, second reading will be noticed for that date.
Thank you.
Mayor, we are curious to see how this works, and I've asked staff to track the number of these that we do, and perhaps in 6 months we can report back to council on how many of these are being constructed and where and what the overall reaction is.
I don't think people are going to understand because there are no parking requirements. What this is going to do, this is going to change the characteristic of our neighborhoods. You know, every one of us who ran here, I'm going to guess, ran saying they wanted to maintain El Segundo's quaint atmosphere, and I think this will change that. Safety and to public works, the infrastructure, that the needs will increase, but the revenue will not increase proportionately. So, thank you. Okay, item number 2 is consideration and possible action to announce the appointments to the Recreation and Parks Commission. And we're actually going to make another announcement. It's an embarrassment of riches in El Segundo for really high caliber, engaged people invested in our town who want to volunteer their time to make it even better. And I'm pleased Dave Lubes and Bob Moda were both appointed to full terms that expire May 30th, 2020. And also Jerome Scott was appointed committee for a term expiring November 30th, 2020. So thank you to everyone who applied and came and interviewed with us, so we got to know them better and see really what consent agenda. Any pulls?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to pull number 6, please.
Number 6 and 8, please.
To approve item 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, and 10.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, you pulled item 6.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Consideration and possible action regarding authorizing the city manager to prepay the city's fiscal year 2017-18 annual unfunded liability contribution, UAL, to California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS. Fiscal impact saving of $258,400. Brandon and I spent, 90 minutes or so today with most of the department heads, city manager, and others today talking about this very important topic. It really was more about the strategy of getting a handle on our unfunded liabilities as a city. As I mentioned in previous meetings, Governance, Transparency, and Labor Relations Committee, and the topic we spent about 3.5 hours on 2 Fridays ago was this very topic, and we actually drafted some policy revisions regarding pensions. That's going to be forthcoming, so I'll share that with the group as soon as I get it. But I'm excited about this opportunity. This is similar to what the state is doing by prepaying $6 billion of unfunded liabilities now and saving, I forget what the number is for them, but it's massive. And for us, an opportunity for $250 million. It seems absolutely logical and the right thing to do. And today, as Dr. Brand can attest, we spent a lot of time talking about additional strategies, probably 8 or 9 that Mr. Lillio had put together in terms of ahead of the important topics facing the finances of our city in the near future. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Did you want to move? Or Dr. Brand, did you have something to say?
No, nothing to add. Well summarized, and that's why one of many steps we'll need to take to address this. Proud of us for getting it together.
All right, so I'll move to approve number 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Thank you. Item number 8, Dr.
Along to complete.
Could you read it, please?
Consideration and possible action to award a professional services contract to Revenue and Cost Specialist, LLC, for the cost allocation and citywide user you included in the packet, and I was just surprised by how long it's going to be before we get the results. Is this typical? It takes this long?
So yes, Dr. Brand, it is. So I've done of the 4 months to work with all the various department heads, departments, to come up with a comprehensive list of services and fees that they provide. Also, what's going to be included is services that we're providing. It takes about 4 months to develop. Many meetings with the various departments. Then it's presented to staff. We do a cursory review, provide our feedback. It's fine-tuned, and then the presentation to council. And particularly, there's going to be some policy discussion around cost recovery. Where do we want cost recovery to be? That's once that feedback is provided to the consultant on the direct council individual, and then there's a public hearing. So usually it's the first reading and a second reading, and ensuring that we are adhering to Proposition 26, if Proposition 218 is involved as well.
So, a bid, and if we went with one of those, that wouldn't have any impact on the timeline?
No. So my My timeline, when I first introduced this item, I believe it was back in May, when I announced I was going to do the RFP, I have to be out.
Move approval of item 8.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-0. New business, consideration and possible action to adopt a resolution to increase the number of $1,200 per fiscal year.
1,200,000.
Yeah, 1,200. City manager.
Mayor, Council, you asked for this item to be placed on this agenda after you considered possible candidates at a previous meeting. Meredith Pettit has put together this report, and this is really a council-generated issue.
I'd like to hear what staff thinks of it, what guidance they can provide.
Thank you very much. I think that increasing the number of the committee members, I understand that there are lots of applicants and experience, and multiple perspectives are always a good thing for the commission. So I can understand that perspective on I think the value in adding would be intimately the commission is an advisory group to the city council, and on a month-to-month basis our agendas are fairly light across the board, and I think that the 5 members that we have currently on the commission, different interests and user groups within the community, and I think that they all do a very good job of providing perspectives of groups that they're either involved with and are also not involved with. So necessarily, could it bring some value in terms of perspective? Sure. But I don't know that it's something that any of the commissioners have not requested of staff to bring to council's attention their desire.
Yeah, indeed. I talked to 2 of the members recently, I think at the Art Walk, about whether they favored the expansion of the commission or not, and work that hard now. And if they get work too hard, they'll come asking for more help. But they have a variety of expertise already on the council, and if you follow their agendas and meeting now, they're going to get a new aquatic center to deal with, but we've got somebody on there who's probably the best person we could have on there in town around that issue. And Top Golf remains to be seen. Leave it alone, and we get frustrated as a council when we, like the mayor said, this embarrassment of riches. We have these great people coming out to serve on our various committees and going to get the few seats that there are, and that stresses us, but that's why we get paid the big bucks. We need to make those decisions, and it's not a situation where everybody gets to win it. There are spots people can apply for that aren't successful with one effort to join a particular commission. That's what I'm hearing from the members, and that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I've heard from I think I'd bring it before, because if you recall, there were a couple options. One is increase the size from 5 to 7. The other was to add a CCB. And I bring that up because Don alluded to it, Dr. Brand. We've got a new aquatics facility. We've got Top Golf potentially, that we've taken on in a while in terms of the users, our residents, as well as staff. And I agree. I think that one of the things that I heard from these commission members, is that we aren't relying on them as much as we. And I think we need to do a better job if we're going to put these people on these CCBs to make their effort worthwhile, that we're actually hearing from them. And we're using them to help us shape recommendations and strategy. So the idea that I brought forth wasn't necessarily to go from 5 to 7 for aquatics. So I don't know if we can even, it says take other action. I don't know if we can discuss that now. We don't have Carol here. I'm not sure where she stands on it, but there were a couple different options, if you recall, that we discussed in closed session. It wasn't just this one.
Discussed and public session, but in the room that you always hold closed session. And
Right, but the door was open. It was
the door
not closed
open. It
session.
was part of the discussion of the appointment of the commissioners. As far as discussion of forming a separate committee, we could ask for that type of discussion.
Yeah, I would prefer that rather than even voting on this, we bring that back specifically at the next meeting.
Right, and I would like to reach out to staff and see how they feel about it if we need an aquatics, because we have had instances behind a pool, so if we already have a group of engaged people who've been doing good work and helped us get to this point, maybe we can continue.
I'll just share that I too discussed this with a couple of the seated members of as I had from the people that I've talked to. Even some other residents are saying that they thought that they did a good job and they were the right number and the right size to continue on. So I'd like to support that going forward. Another commission, let's look at that. If you wanted to look at that, I'm open.
The number of the senior housing board from 7 to 5, because there are logistical issues with that many committee members or commissioners. So.
And we have 17 on EDAC, so I think it's a little bit case dependent interest in that Park Vista Commission. It'd be nice if we did. It's a little plug for senior housing. We could get more people to apply to that. But, okay, so are we going to vote on this, Mayor, or are we going to?
Just going to table it, or what are we going to do?
I think we're going to.
I think you're giving regarding the formation of an aquatics advisory commission or some similar name.
I would, and can this report obviously could include the feedback from the Rex and Park Commission, right, as well? Okay.
Right, if it could be an item on their agenda to discuss, if they think there's a need.
I'd like more information on the aquatics group that you mentioned. What's the status of that? We've always had a pool here in town. We're just adding a couple more to it. So, of what we've been doing. Yeah.
That's a very good idea. Thank you, Dr. Brand. So if you could include that, Meredith and Greg. Thank you. Item 12, consideration and possible action for professional audit services for the City of El Segundo, fiscal impact unknown. Manager?
Joe Lillio will describe what staff intends to do with this item.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Of our auditors since 2008. Auditing and accounting best practices, as well as California State Code, Government Code Section 12410.6B, necessitate municipalities to release every. So I've attached a timeline in the staff report of the RFP, the key dates and key audit dates. Just please note that I'm going to have to push those dates out by about 2 weeks. So by August 1st, that's going to be pushed to August 15th. Funding for the audit services is budgeted within the finance department each year. The current cost for audit services by Davis Farr LLP is approximately $59,000.
Thank you. Any questions?
The time that you need to shop for a new auditor, I thought you said it was 8 years, but it's been like 10 years ago. Say that part again.
The services of Davis Farr, they used to be, what was the name? Meyer Hoffman McCann PC. They changed names to Davis Farr, but we've been utilizing their services since 2008. Between then and then, to change partners. So the same firm can apply for the RFP if the city so permits them. It's just they would need to have a different audit partner and audit team.
How long can you go? 6 years?
Every 5 to 6 years. 6 years.
2008?
Yes,
So
that's when they initiated the contract.
Switched some partners?
Dr. Brand, I wasn't involved in that RFP, but I can get those answers for you. Right. So there was an RFP issued in there.
Is this the firm that did the audits in the city of Bell?
Right. So Meyer Hoffman McCann, yes, that is the same firm. This is a different. Right.
We have, just receive and file.
No, we don't know
Thank
these
you.
guys. Jeez.
Okay.
Mayor, Council, I'd like to thank all the employees who will be working on the 4th of July for us every year. We have a group of folks, not just from the real visible police and fire departments, but also from Rec and Parks, obviously, and Public Works that work on this holiday and make sure we have a good time. We are planning a swearing-in ceremony for our new police chief, Chief Whalen, on July 5th at 10:30 in the council chambers, and that's open to the public, and the public is encouraged to attend. And what that also means is this is the last time since his retirement. I did want to publicly, though, thank him for his 38 years of dedicated service to the City of El Segundo. He cares a great deal about this city, about his department, about his people. He's very proud of his folks and what he's accomplished. So thank you, sir. And that concludes my report, ma'am.
Thank you. City Attorney?
Nothing.
Our city treasurer's not here this evening. Council members. Councilmember Brand, you have an item under your name.
Yeah, and I wanted to say how nice the art walk was last Thursday. Really enjoyed getting market on top of it. I made it all the way from Reuben's Distillery on the far southeast end to the public library on the far northwest end. That takes a lot of hustle. So that was great. Today, there was our first concert in the park. Really good group with 50s music. We're working our way up here through the decades, and they were good. And maybe because it was a fun thing to do with Dad, I think it's out in the morning for the event. And staying all the way through. History tent was up and lots of people coming in there. And nice. That's all I've got.
You have an item under your name.
Oh, yeah. Well, so this is about the city's logo, which until this year you bias, and this is one that was produced here in town and developed by the Centennial Committee, Centennial Celebration Committee, and a local firm on Grand Avenue, and put it up here 6 months ago or so. I think with the thought it would be here for this year, and then we'd go back to the logo that we've had here for decades. Some point about how much brighter and more positive this logo was than the one with all the black smoke, etc., and that the elements are upgraded, like a satellite, and there, like the high school and the waves and the sun and chevron and the water tank and the blue butterfly. So it does incorporate a lot of the elements that are important to us here. And so I talked to the committee about it, and I talked with the Arts and Cultural Committee about it to see what feedback I would receive about this. And you know, most people in town don't know what the logo looks like. Really? We do. So I just put it on here as a possible ability that we would change going forward to this audit for our second 100 years. And see what you thought about that. See, like changing Sepulveda to Pacific Coast Highway will on our businesses. So this isn't a hill I'm going to die on. It's just what the council's pleasure is.
And staff to bring it back on an agenda so we can discuss.
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe that'll draw everybody out to say what they really think.
Yes. Councilmember Perstek is not with us this evening. Councilmember Dugan.
You know, I'm not opposed to changing the logo. I'd like to see, I mean, this was a great change. I'd like to see something else come up as a possible logo look into the future. So we can ask the staff to look at that. But whoever does this, I think it's a great idea to maintain some of the history of the city and try to predict some of the future. That'd be interesting. So I'd like to see what that looks like. So I think it's a great idea. We'll do. All right. it's our last meeting, and I'm happy to say that they take our input very seriously, and they've done some significant things over there in the last year to try and improve their performance. In particular, doing an acid wash on their scrubbers over there. So they have a constant flow of sewage coming into the plant. It has some gases coming off of it, and they typically have scrubbers that take care of that. And periodically they have to take, and they in the past have unfortunately vented some of those odors to the air, and then our residents on the west side have had to suffer through that. Well, they're in the process right now of finally putting in a more positive closing dampers. They won't have the leakage, the venting that they had in the past. Now, that's the great news to hear that they're doing it. The unfortunate news is in the process of installing these, we're going to have similar kind of instances where until these are installed, when they and they're going to do everything they can to minimize that. But I'm encouraged that what they're doing today is going to make it better in the future so that we hopefully eliminate this problem going forward. So they're making some great strides. Aside some letters that came out that said they were going to be doing this on certain days, and we want people to be aware that this is going on. So if you have an issue, if you have an odor and you want to call, that's the right thing to do. Very serious. Just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. That's good to know. Mayor Pro Tem Boyles.
Looking forward to a meeting with Department of Water and Power downtown Thursday to hopefully get a better understanding from their chief executive in terms of what they're going to do with it, and also hopefully get some irrigation in play for the trees along that corridor as well. So fingers crossed, we'll see what we can do. And I know Greg's going to accompany me to that meeting, and Kobe King as well, our city lobbyist. So looking forward to getting some results there. Hopefully.
I have a lot of things. I want to report on the last 2 weeks. I attended the regional coyote meeting that was held by the South Bay Cities Council of Governments, and Lieutenant Lehman, Swirl from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, was there. He's been there repeatedly, but he went to a meeting, I think in DC, about wildlife and coyotes, and he said this is the first regional alliance in the country that all the cities about the coyotes, so he was really excited and proud to be a part of it. I was really honored to attend the Schriever Wall of Honor induction at Los Angeles Air Force Base. That's where General Bernard Schriever is known as the father of space and missiles, and the people who are inducted on that are just incredible patriots. It was extra exciting for me because two of the inductees who are no CTRW, as am I, and I got to see a family member there, so that was nice. I also attended the Salute to SMC, which is an awards banquet that they have for the airmen, the officers, and the contractors of Los Angeles Air Force Base, with Councilmember Perstech, as well as the South Bay City COG Steering Committee. I attended the Tech Hub that the Chamber held at Biz House a couple weeks ago, or last week maybe, that was about social media, and it was really exciting. Panel of people who do this at such a high level that it was very interesting, and I learned a lot from that. I also, last week, was honored to attend an event at the Lundquists, Richard and Melanie Lundquist, who certainly are no strangers to El Segundo. They're so generous to our city and our region. They donated $32 million to the hospital, bringing their donation up to $100 million, the largest and orthopedic institute at both. So, as I've said before about the Lundquists, they are proof that angels walk amongst us. And by doing that, they are giving this tremendous resource to us, to our city, to our that we can take a part of. So, I personally have been in the Richard and Melanie Lundquist emergency room and the Richard and Melanie Lundquist tower, and I'm so grateful to them because we don't have a hospital in El Segundo. So, but because of their thank you. Also, I want to join the city manager. First, I want to wish everybody a happy Independence Day. We're so fortunate to live in the most wonderful country in the world. And I want to thank our employees who worked that day. You know, in hours, and people who would probably rather be home celebrating this holiday with their family, but instead they're working to give us a wonderful celebration. So thank you. I would like to get a conversation going on the agenda in a Main Street. I think I heard that earlier this evening about, in fact, in the interviews even we heard about, you know, it's should be the pride and joy of El Segundo, and we've invested a lot in Richmond, and it's beautiful and charming. And
We actually have an item on your next agenda to talk about specifically landscaping, but we can broaden that conversation to other elements of Main Street improvements.
thank you. And then tomorrow night, I'm invited to speak to, and I've been asked to greet all these young women who are going to be an intensive 6-week course about coding and STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. And as an engineer and biologist, I'm thrilled with the opportunity. And earlier tonight, Dr. Brand talked about our Centennial Logo, and we've been celebrating a really special event this year, 100 years. But there's actually another event that we should be celebrating, and that is John and Sari Brand were married, and this past weekend they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. So the Brands are dear friends of mine. They are wonderful public servants. They have hearts of servants. There isn't any. On behalf of the City of El Segundo and the council, Dr. Brand and Sari, happy wedding anniversary, happy 50th. Thanks for all you do to make our lives better. It's a pleasure to celebrate with you, sir. So, and if for any, they'll see a beautiful picture of their wedding day, and hopefully it'll be projected on cable television so people can see this beautiful young couple, all full of hope, and know all the wonderful things they've accomplished over the last 50 years.
I hope he remembers it. She should have told you beforehand, just to make sure, right?
It was June 17th, so I'm okay on that. That is the Glass Church, the Wayfarers Chapel in Portuguese Bend, and 19 met at Hawthorne High School and went together for 5 years and got married between my junior and senior year at USC. I was kind of slow, or else I'd be at 55 years now. Back was inside of Marineland. Marineland was like SeaWorld is, okay? And now they call it Terranea, okay? So things change, but we're still together. We have 2 great daughters, and we've had a blessed family life together.
And a grandson.
A grandson to keep everything going, and just a great career these last 50 years, and we'll try to keep it going. Thank you for the recognition. I really appreciate it, and I know Sari will.
Yes, thank you. And I realize I skipped over an event. I want this to be the last thing. Sorry. I have an item. Mayor Fuentes to participate in a diplomatic trade mission to the People's Republic of China. As I mentioned our last meeting, I was invited to go on this. There was no expense to the city for me to attend. This says for council to approve. Transparent, and if you have any comments about it. So, okay, without any comments, then we'll go back to the Brands. And we get to end on a happy note. We'll go back to public communications.
Jack.
My name is Jack Axelrod. I live at 317 Richmond Street, Apartment B. I've been a resident for about 18 years. Tonight, I frequently am very apologetic. I do very little for the city. I've done virtually nothing since my first or second year here when I volunteered my services to the drama department at the high school. But my own career has continued, not very much in the last year, but until then. The logo, I think that's deplorable. From the third row back here, it looks like a figure of some sort carrying a weapon. It's really pretty awful. My own background, as I've told you before, was in architectural training at the University of California. I was a licensed architect. I have a University of Maine. I've continued to paint, draw, sketch ever since I got out of the university. I do very little now. I'm lazy. I'm old. I spent my entire life avoiding responsibility. And for the first time, congratulate Mr. and Mrs. Brand on 50 years together. I find that remarkable. From one who, as I say myself, I have spent all of my life avoiding responsibility, and you have taken responsibility on. The People's Republic of China. That sounds really great. I'm listening to the Russian of the Greek Orthodox Church, I guess he is. If you listen very, very closely to what he said, it sounded like he was instructing this non-existent creature, God, to perform certain functions or certain actions. He doesn't know anything about the existence of God, and nobody in this room does. I include myself. To instruct God on this non-existent creature on what to do and how to take care of us, height of pride. Once again, I will say as I've said before, get rid of the invocation altogether. If people want to pray, let them hang around to the end of the city council meeting and then hold a group prayer if that's what they're doing. And it's underlined in the calendar of events tonight. It's in the schedule of events. It's underlined the business of El Segundo. Well, I don't know I still don't know. I've been here 18 years and I still don't know what the business of El is. To assume that our business is to produce weapons and the instruments of death to be used by our military and the rest of the world. I'm not a neural. I've not studied. Think of the words. Anyway, I'm not a social scientist. Ordinary person. It seems to me that we should be asking military or law enforcement as a vocation. I have my own feelings about it. I think it's terrible. What a terrible thing to choose for your life vocation, the military or law enforcement. I've done a lot of terrible things, but those are not among them. Once again, I congratulate you. My God, you're nice people. I'm just overwhelmed by how nice you are. I don't think, however, you're particularly wise, and I question sometimes your erudition. I wonder how many of you have ever read Upton Sinclair's novel, Oil! Which pretty much delineates the way in which the United States government was sold to the fossil fuel industry, and they still own the country. So I recommend that to anybody who's never read it or who Sinclair. Oh, well, anyway, I'll finish
Time's
there.
up.
Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your obvious concern for the city of El Segundo.
See no more public communications. We'll close. Council comments? Mr. Axelrod, if you're an artist and an actor and an artist, maybe you ought to get involved. Okay. So
well, that would require responsibility, right?
all right, well, seeing no comments, we are adjourned. Thank you, Chief Tavera.